You kind of have a unique skill set and experience to be doing the pack survival stuff. Combination of many different skill sets from different jobs.
I grew up Northern California in the hospitality winery industry, and then I joined the U.S. Coast Guard in the late 90s and got on with counter narcotics, alien migration task force, and I was a federal boarding officer with the Coast Guard for 4 years. I did a total of 5 with the Coast Guard, and then I eventually found my way back to San Francisco, where I started off as an EMT, and then I became a paramedic, all doing dedicated. As an EMT, I did what they call basic life support stuff, which is taking Granny to and from their medical appointments if they can't walk on their own.
Right.
And then when I became a paramedic, I was on a dedicated 911 ambulance. And after a few years, I became what's known as a field training officer. And I was responsible for being the gatekeeper for the city and county of San Francisco for new EMTs and paramedics that wanted to work in that county. I was basically the last hurdle before they could practice medicine legally.
Right.
And show their bare minimum legal skills to practice medicine. And then honestly, I got burnt out on that job, working the streets. It's a very high volume, high variety city, and it wears on you. So I got an opportunity to work for a private security company in Iraq as a tactical paramedic for their client was the State Department. And so I was on the U.S. Embassy Baghdad emergency response team as a tactical paramedic. And that's when I started working more closely with working canines, operational canines, whatever you want to call them, bomb dogs mostly. And because we're the only medicine in parts of that environment, the canine and the handlers become my responsibility as well. So that's kind of how I started working and getting basic emergency veterinary style classes. And they folded into my scope, my extended scope of practice in austere, tactical, conflict area environments. I worked in Baghdad for 2.5 years, and then I moved over to Kabul, Afghanistan, on movement teams for a similar contract. The State Department was the client of the company that I worked for, and this time it was more of a, the easiest way to explain it is we're the Secret Service for the U.S. State Department in conflict areas. That's the easiest way I can break it down so people can picture what my job actually is.
Right.
And I'm still doing that. So basically, diplomats, congressional delegations will come to Afghanistan, and we will plan routes and provide security and medical care for those diplomats to get to their meetings and make sure that they return safely. And again, we use canines as part of our advance unit. So the advance will go before the main body, and they'll sniff around and check for bombs, basically. And, I go to their trainings and hang out, and we try and, it's, I'm not gonna lie, it's enjoyable for me to hang out with the dogs. So it's a nice break.
Do you go with the advanced teams?
Yeah, sometimes. It depends. Generally, there'll be a medic for the advanced team, and there'll be a medic for the main body, because they're two separate groups. So if something happens to one of them and they're stuck out in the city without a medic, that would be potentially bad for them. An advanced team is almost separate. It's their own thing.
Your early background in like the hospitality industry, kind of, I could see that coming into play with the work that you did in San Francisco.
You can ask a homeless chronic inebriate what their favorite varietal of wine is. No, it's basically just bedside manner and interacting with people. I think that's the key. I mean, to be a paramedic, you have to like people and you have to quickly gain their trust as quickly as you can, or else, life is going to be a lot harder for everyone. I think working in restaurants, hospitality is good for any young person to learn basic skills on how to interact with people.
Right. We were talking about an incident that sort of ignited your interest in doing the pack survival, which kind of called on multiple skill sets that you had. Can you tell me that story?
I was, a few years into dog training and getting more serious about it. And I was just walking my personal dog down the street in the complex area that I live in California. And I saw this elderly neighbor guy on the other side of the street, maybe 50 yards away. And my dog was sniffing around, so I was paying attention to my dog. And I looked down, and I looked back up, and the guy was no longer visible. And I had a sneaking suspicion he didn't bolt off and move really fast. I kind of thought to myself, man, I hope he didn't fall over. And as I was walking closer and closer, maybe a total of 10 seconds, as my line of sight was changing, I could see on the other side of the car, his feet were sticking out, horizontal. And he was on the ground for sure. Wow. And that's when I changed my pace, because you never want to run into a situation. You always have to maintain the golden rule of scene safety. Even though there's not bullets flying and you're not in a combat zone, you still can't lose your mind because you think somebody might be injured, and you don't know why he fell, though. So it could be an environmental concern. There could be live wire, or, a pack of killer bees. Who knows? Right. That's interesting that you say that about the not rushing into. Mm. Obviously, somebody's in an emergency situation, so you don't know how they got there. Yeah. So running into it, it's like running into... Yeah, it's like the classic story of the sniper bait. You know, he's leading people in. That's a little bit more obvious, but... There's another classic where it's like you open a door to a closed compartment and there's 8 people piled up in the middle of the room. And you're like, oh, you rush to help. And the reason that there's 8 people is because everybody rushed to help. And it was like an environmental gas leak or something. Right. And now you're useless and dead.
You're number 9.
Yeah, you're with that group of dead people because you rushed to your death. Right. And that's, there's little sayings that you pick up along the way. Like one of the things that we say a lot, in a combat zone is never rush to your death. I strongly agree, take a second, and I tell everyone that I train, take a second, take a deep breath and get a good assessment before you start moving towards what you don't know, and as a professional rescuer, you do not bring chaos and fear and the unknown. You bring stability and calm to chaos. You counteract it. You don't add. You don't. Right. Yeah, you're not a contributing factor of chaos. So I get really irritated even when supposed professionals start to lose their head. So I get a better line of sight and I make a nice wide arc, or a horseshoe we call it, and I get a good line of sight on him, and I see the guy's feet sticking out. And then as I pie around, these are all techniques that we use to stay safe. As I pie around and get a better view of his upper body, I realize that his dog is now being aggressive towards my dog, and there's a huge puddle of blood forming. And it was actually, I was kind of surprised. I was like, wow, that's a pretty good sized puddle of blood in, the 5 seconds it took me to walk over. Right. And the guy was, doing the classic moaning snort sound. And I was like, oh, this could be a head injury, and this could be a lot worse than I wanted to deal with on my doggy walk. But anyway, his dog comes at my dog. So the first thing I have to do, the first rule is scene safety and don't put yourself in danger. So this dog was definitely a priority because it was coming at me and my dog, and I wasn't sure what the intentions were. It was like a weird Boston Terrier mix, maybe, of some kind. So I had to grab the dog by the leash. Luckily, he had a leash on him. And I pulled him up the hill to where there was this stairway with a banister, and I tied the dog off to the banister, and then I went directly to my patient. I downed my dog, my well-trained dog. I gave him an emergency down while I was handling this dog. And now turning around, as I turned around to see my patient, I could see my well-trained, obedient dog just in a down position watching over the situation. Yeah. So I get up to the patient. I give a quick assessment on his mental faculties, and I realize that he's pretty much with it. And I noticed there was also there's hemorrhaging going on his wrist. So I wanted to stop the bleeding. But that day, I didn't bring gloves with me. And I always bring gloves with me. And it was just one of those laundry transfer type situations. Mm-hmm. So I kind of got irritated that I didn't have, my bare minimum is gloves, because at least I can touch people without having fear of getting any sort of bloodborne pathogen, and that's another thing to really consider is maybe you shouldn't help, maybe it's just too dangerous, it's hard to resist that, feeling of, oh, I gotta help. But sometimes you're actually putting yourself in danger. Luckily, we were near a doggy poo bag station that's in my complex. There's I don't know if you've seen them. They're like little stands with dog poo bags and a trash can where you can dispose of your dog poop. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't thought about this before, but I just started pulling the doggy bags off of the roll, and I came out with, 6 or 7 feet of dog poo bags put together, and I used that as a pressure dressing to stop the bleeding on this guy's wrist. And I was at the same time I was gently having him sit up on his own and assessing his mentation, his mental ability, and trying to assess whether or not he had in fact a head injury, which he did not.
Luckily. He did not.
In the early stages, I did not think he was exhibiting any of the signs and symptoms. And so when we got him sitting upright and the bleeding was under control, I had a few more directed questions to basically assess whether or not there was a head injury going on. And there was not. So I had him stand up, and we got his dog, and we went back to his house. And then I cleaned and dressed his wounds as best I could. And, saved him a trip to the hospital. But I did tell him, if you should probably go to the hospital just in case. And I let him make that determination later. It was interesting because it kind of hit me that not only was the dog training a part of the scenario, because if my dog was unable to comply, then I would have had 2 crazy dogs. Right. And the patient would have not been tended to anytime soon, and maybe not ever. Right. I don't know. But because my dog was thankfully trained enough to listen to me at that moment, I was able to deal with his dog, tie up that guy, and then deal with the patient. And so that's kind of where I hatched the idea of putting emergency medicine and dog walking, dog obedience together. And I came up with the whole pack survival idea where, the pack is you, your pets, your family, and, how to just best take care of them in any situation and remain calm and do the best thing that you can, that if you're in uniform, then you have a duty to act. I was not in uniform, and I didn't have a duty to act, so I could have just kept walking, right. But that's not right. So, and I usually do keep gloves in my pocket because I do have a special skill set, and I do have knowledge that a majority of people don't. So I just think it's the right thing to do. Hey, it's your lucky day. Johnny brought gloves.
Aside from making the students more aware of their surroundings and what they should be looking for and what they should be preparing for in those eventualities, whether they're mass casualty situations or whether they're just...
I don't want people to get the idea that it's all about the big disaster, the big earthquake. Mitigating the little annoyances that happen because you weren't paying attention. You weren't thinking about it. And all of a sudden, you're on the ground and your dog is chasing after a squirrel or attacking the neighbor's cat. And if you would have had your footing ready, then, that could have been avoided. I don't want people to be paranoid and afraid. I want them to have the opposite. I want them to be empowered and feel calm because they know what to do. On some level, if I have to use your pet to make you think about it, then that's what I'll do. And at the end of the day, you're 100% responsible for your dog and your cat. So maybe not the cat, but the dog's not going to be able to make, good decisions and prepare and all that stuff. So
it's all on you. Yeah.
It's all on you.
So aside from preparedness, then there's also treatment.
I don't want to talk, I don't want people to think preparedness and get classified into the crazy doomsday prepper person, but there is a level of being prepared and set up for emergencies. We live in California, or you could be anywhere in the world, and you'll have natural disasters that usually come seasonally. You should be ready for that. But the other big thing that I focus on is situational awareness and being able to navigate your day more safely and more aware of your surroundings, which helps you mitigate risk. It's not rocket science. It's just be mindful of what you're doing and allowing yourself, because we've all done things that we know aren't necessarily the best to be doing. You're driving down the street and you've got your cell phone and your cup of coffee and you're doing 10 different things and you're like, this is probably a bad idea. Maybe I should wait to do this. And sometimes that's what you do, and you just pull over and you do the right thing. Being more aware of moments like that. I know that there's a crazy boxer that lives on this stretch of the road, and my dog is reactive to that dog. It's time and place predictable. You go there every morning. So why are you surprised when things get a little out of hand in that stretch of your walk? Maybe you should reposition your coffee cup. Maybe you should have the dog in a more controlled state, as you approach that time and place predictable area.
Now, what about in terms of something bad has already happened? Obviously, the variables there are infinite, but what are you able to teach the students?
Like I said, I'm able to give students kind of an empowering view, maybe re-examine what they should be examining as far as situational awareness and basic medical procedures that will get you from your bad situation to a better one, hopefully a veterinarian or somebody that has a higher level of care medically, and just basic preparedness knowledge. I believe a well-trained person can think their way out of a bad situation and into a better one. And that's basically what I'm promoting.